As Russia and the West trade bitter accusations over the American air raid in Syria, Conflict Zone is in Moscow, and my guest is a leading Russian politician. He's Konstantin Kosachev, chairman of the powerful Foreign Affairs Committee of the Federation Council, the upper house of parliament. So just how bad are relations going to get between Moscow and Washington? Konstantin Kosachev, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the American raid on Syria, first of all. The Kremlin called it an act of aggression and a violation of international law. Do you seriously believe that America is going to take lessons on international law from a country that had nothing to say about Syria's violations of international law or international humanitarian law?
Well, it does not depend on who make this type of comments. We should keep ourselves to the substance of what is going on. And I am absolutely sure that the military operation of the United States may be classified only in one way. It is a very strong violation of international law, because even in case one speaks about a so-called humanitarian intervention or a so-called responsibility to protect, one still needs to have an authorization from the Security Council of the United Nations.
But my point is, your view is inconsistent here. On the one hand, you condemn America for what you call a violation of international law. You have nothing to say about Syria and its manifold violations of international law. Why is that?
By Russia.
No, Russia, have nothing to say about Syria's violations. Why don't you hold Syria to the same standard as you're holding America?
We do hold Syria to the same standards. We are not in Syria in order to either defend or fight against the ruling authority there. We are in Syria.
You're not defending Assad?
No, definitely not.
Really?
Absolutely.
You've turned the war in his favor and you've kept him in office.
We have not started a war in his favor. We know that
you
certain
have
countries...
The war. You have turned the war.
Sorry, please. The war was started by other countries against the ruling authorities in Syria several years ago. Russia interfered in this scenario because we could face a repetition of the previous tragedies of other countries and people in the region, like Iraq and Libya. We all know what happened there, and we definitely did not want to see any kind of repetition of that bad scenario. For us, there is no choice: either Mr. Assad should stay or should go. This is nothing we take our position on.
And yet you protect him militarily, and you also protect him against resolutions in the Security Council that would hold him to account, which you have consistently vetoed over the last 6 years.
No, definitely not. We do not protect Mr. Assad. We fight together and along with the Syrian army against terrorists on the territory of Syria. And this is
just semantics, isn't it? This is just semantics.
No, it is definitely not.
This is just semantics.
No, this is a crucial difference. This is a crucial
difference. You would like to make it a crucial difference, but it isn't, in fact, is it?
Well, for me it is, whether you like it or not. For me, definitely a huge difference. And I have not seen a single politician in the West, either in the United States, in Germany, or elsewhere, who would tell me what happens next if Mr. Assad resigns. Will it be better for the country? Will it be better for the people of Syria? Or will it get worse?
What are you telling me? That there's no alternative to a massive human rights violator in the shape of Assad's regime? You're telling me that there's no alternative?
I've been in Syria many times before the internal crisis in Syria was provoked from outside. Syria is not the best. It is not the worst country in the region. We have many other countries in the region which have much more serious problems with human rights.
Not according to the Human Rights Commissioner, the UN's Human Rights Commissioner, who said last September, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, who said that for some of the greatest violations on record in the history of the Human Rights Council, Assad's regime is responsible for those. Some of the gravest violations on record in the history of the Human Rights Council. This is the man you're protecting. You say you're not protecting.
Again, we are not protecting anybody in Syria. We try to assist to a solution of a really important problem of international terrorism in Syria, which has become much worse due to the outside intervention in the inside affairs of Syria. The internal crisis in Syria was provoked from outside. The West is responsible for that provocation. It did not happen to many other countries in the region, deserving a very critical attitude from the West.
And the West holds you responsible for current violations that the Syrian government is making. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said, actually a few hours before we recorded this interview, that he reserves the right, America reserves the right.
Who is Mr. Tillerson? The God himself?
He's the Secretary of State. No,
yes,
can I
know,
just tell you what he said?
I mean,
his position.
Yes,
can I tell you his position? That they reserve the right to make accountable anyone guilty of crimes against humanity.
The Secretary of State of the United States of America is not the global judge of the mankind.
Well, how else would you suggest then that the international community holds Assad to account when you block every resolution against him in the Security Council?
Because we believe that there is a much more serious problem inside of Syria which needs to be addressed in the first hand.
Much more serious than the man who is named by the UN as responsible for the deaths of 300,000 people.
He was not named by UN
Ban Ki-moon.
as that.
Ban Ki-moon.
Again, Ban Ki-moon is the Secretary General of the United Nations. Former Secretary General, but has no authority to speak on behalf of the organization. He has his successor as well. They have an authority to represent the organization, but decisions are taken by the Security Council. And the Security Council is a collective body.
Yes,
with equal
subject
rights
to veto by any member of the Permanent Five, a veto which you have used consistently over the last 6 years in Assad's favor.
I know, not in Assad's favor, but in
He's
order
very
to
pleased
prevent,
with you.
He is not. He is not, believe me. And I spoke
Why
to
not?
Mr.
Why not? Why isn't he pleased with you?
I spoke with Mr. Assad on the 29th of December last year, personally, and we discussed this issue. And he told me, look, if your president, Mr. Putin, would sometime tell to the people that he is here in order to defend Mr. Assad, I will be the first one to protest, because I will consider it as an intervention in our internal affairs. That was
well,
his
he's very
position.
glad to welcome your troops and your anti-aircraft defences. He hasn't objected in the slightest.
My friend,
there's been no objection to that.
I admire your ignorance of previous facts which we face in Iraq and Libya. You may be as happy as possible about protecting the human rights of people in Iraq and in Libya. But you and people like you have
Mr. Kosachev, you can make whatever
failed.
comparisons you like. You can make whatever comparisons you like. But this is about one of the most powerful countries in the world, Russia, supporting one of the biggest human rights violators.
This is a wrong description. This is a false interpretation of what is going on in Syria, very much to the surface, because problems of Syria are much deeper. And the largest problem of Syria is still the problem of ISIL and international terrorism there. And international terrorism, which will sooner or later come and already comes to the streets of Washington and Berlin and other cities, does not care who is in power in Syria.
Can we deal for a moment?
We have only one chance. We have two chances to defeat international terrorism in Syria. One, we have to get together. We have to be a union against terrorism there. And secondly, we need to have a functionable army there on land, on
Can we deal
surface.
with the moment?
And we need Mr. Assad and his government and his army in order to defeat.
It's not the Western view. It's not the Western
I do
view.
not belong to the West.
No.
Happily enough.
Can I just ask you about comments made by your Prime Minister, Dmitry Medvedev, who said that the US airstrikes, completely ruined relations between the US and Russia, and that the two countries were on the verge of a military clash? How can that be when every effort was made to show that this was a one-off message and not the start of a war? You were warned in advance that the Americans were going to bomb the airbase. Presumably you warned the Syrians as well. This was a limited action, a one-off limited military action. How does it ruin relations so completely between Russia and the US?
Number one, nobody knows, neither you nor me, whether it is a limited action or probably Mr. Trump tomorrow will take another decision about any other military action or many actions in the future. Nobody knows because Mr. Trump is unpredictable. This is number one. And number two, he acts outside the framework of the international law. The tragedy of Idlib did not involve any American citizens, as far as I know. The tragedy of Idlib did not affect any security interests of the United States of America. Whatsoever happened,
he says his security interests were involved because the use and spread of chemical weapons.
What I definitely dislike is that I am interrupted all the time. This is not the way how interviews are being done. But please keep yourself.
We have a lively discussion here.
Yes, but
I promised you a lively discussion.
Yes, interruptions is not a lively discussion, unfortunately, in my mind. But in any case, the United States of America does not have anything to do with this tragedy more than any other country in the world. We are all very much concerned, but the United States of America does not have any specific right to speak on behalf of the mankind, on behalf of the Security Council, on behalf of the United Nations, on behalf of NATO or the European Union. So they take this decision.
It is on behalf of victims that they are speaking. It's on behalf of victims, Mr. Kosachev.
You know, have you seen the report of the Swedish medical organization against Warrant for Peace? I don't remember the name of this organization. Telling, the statement was done 1 or 2 days ago that this is a fake situation.
This is one organization.
Probably, but why should I believe them less than anybody else? Again, if countries like Germany confess that the only ruling country in the world is the United States of America, it's up to you. It's up to you. But this is something we dislike strongly because we see how many mistakes the United States of America committed in the past. We all remember Colin Powell in the Security Council, and you should not deny that. At that moment, everybody was convinced that they know the truth, and they are entitled to act on behalf of the whole world.
Mr. Kosachev, we can go back through history. We can go back through history to any mistakes.
Falsified story. If I were the president of the United States of America or any other country, the first thing I would have done would be to insist on an inspection sent to Idlib on one hand and to any other places of interest, possible interest of this situation.
I want to come on to inspections in a minute. But
just a second.
Can I just ask you this? I need to ask you this.
No, do you know that we have proposed to our American colleagues to arrange a joint inspection to Idlib, and they refused. They told us, look, the only place we are interested to have inspection on is this airport and nothing more. For me, I am not an expert on that, but for me, the only evidence which is strong enough is a chemical analysis of the weapons which were used. It is absolutely easy to determine whether they were produced officially, unofficially.
Okay. I get your point.
It was never done. It was never done. Okay.
The Joint Command of Russia, Iran, and Iranian-backed militias issued a statement on Sunday saying the US attack has crossed red lines and it would respond to any new aggression and increase support for Assad. Okay?
I'm not aware of this statement. I believe you interpret it in a very broad way, because we never.
This was on the news agencies.
We never use this wording that Russia supports Assad, because we do not support Mr. Assad. Once again, we support the legal military operation in Syria conducted by the legal authorities of Syria against terrorists.
If there is
not
another
against
strike,
the opposition, but against the terrorists.
If there is another strike, what will you do?
It will be equally unlawful. It will be equally
but
unlawful.
what will you do?
I hope there will not be another strike.
But if there is Moscow going to respond?
I do not want to speculate on that, because this is a nightmare scenario. I would like.
Are there people here in this government who would like to respond if there is another attack?
There are so many people in this government who would like to see better cooperation from the United States of America in order to learn the truth, in order to send an objective mission on site and to learn more about what type of weapons were used, where they were produced, who is in control of these weapons, and who is to take the responsibility on that. Only afterwards, we may or we may not work out joint or separate actions against those who are responsible. But first you have to take certain steps which are absolutely logical.
And we
you
have
cannot
had
proceed.
steps in the past. We had...
Not this time.
I'm telling you, I'm saying that in the past, in 2014 and 2015, the Organization for Prohibiting Chemical Weapons concluded that both the Syrian government and ISIS had been involved in the use of chemical weapons. In the case of the Syrian government, in violation of commitments that it had made. The Syrian Air Force was held responsible for 2 chlorine attacks on civilians, one in the village of Talmanes on April 21st, 2014, the second in Samin on March the 16th, 2015. You said nothing about these.
No.
You could have stopped Assad from using chlorine on unarmed civilians. You could have stopped him, couldn't you?
And this is exactly what Russia succeeded to do. Because I do remember...
The attacks took place.
I do remember how the United States of America and other Western countries proposed to attack Mr. Assad the year of 2012, the year of 2013.
I'm talking about 2014 and 15.
The year of 2014. Thanks to the efforts of Russia, and thanks God, we managed to convince Mr. Obama to support this. We succeeded in cooperation with this organization of prohibiting chemical weapons to get the chemicals weapons either destroyed or out of Syria.
Not all of them, obviously. Not all of them.
That was done.
Not all of them, clearly, because he used chlorine in 2014
My dear friend,
and 15.
not clearly, because these weapons could have been produced by terrorists.
This is the Organization for Prohibiting Chemical Weapons. You don't trust them?
Yes,
either?
I trust them. And they have stated there is no chemical weapons in possession of the legal authorities of Syria since this program was completed in 2014. And we have an official statement by the Organization of Prohibiting the Chemical Weapons. And now, if we have any hesitations on that, we should use
They do have hesitations. They do have hesitations, as you know.
We should use the capacities of this organization instead of using military strikes of one single country without any strong evidence of who is responsible and who is not responsible, who is right and who is wrong.
Last year, the Executive Council of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons expressed grave concern, this is just 5 months ago, that Syria had failed to resolve a number of gaps, inconsistencies and discrepancies in its reporting. It demanded that Syria comply fully with its international obligations regarding declaration and disclosures. Why don't you support the OPCW in this and make Syria live up to its international obligations? But you don't care. You don't care, do
we
you?
definitely care. We definitely care, and this is why we invested so much in this program of destroying the chemical weapons of Syria. That was our effort, and that was our success story, whether you like it or not, and we are proud of it. And of course, if there are any hesitations of whether the authorities of Syria fulfill or do not fulfill their commitments in terms of reporting and all that stuff, it does not prove that they are responsible for the chemical attack in Idlib. It does not.
The OPCW
anything.
concluded
This
they
is what
were
you want,
responsible.
This is what you want to see in
No,
this situation.
I don't want to see anything, but I am.
You do.
I am
You do.
pointing out to
You know,
Mr. Kosachev, that they
you
were
would-
responsible for chlorine attacks in 2014 and 15, according to the OPCW.
You would have been an excellent politician because you're a partisan. You're not a journalist, frankly speaking, because you take a part and you try to prove to me that the only truth which exists is
My job
on
is
your
to
side.
challenge you. My job is to challenge you.
Well, it's not.
I challenge everybody.
It's not exactly challenging because you're interrupting me all the time again. But once again, if the international community has authorized a certain organization to make conclusions on a certain situation, there should be this organization and nobody else taking final solutions. This time, we had this tragedy of Idlib on the 4th of April. 2 days and a half later, without any investigation, without any missions on site, without any conclusions from this organization on prohibition of chemical weapons, one country attacks another country with military force.
But what
Who
happened
is
when
this
we
country?
had the
Which is this country?
Mr. Kosachev? What happened when in 2014, 2015, the OPCW, which you say you respect, reported that Syria had been using chlorine? It was ignored. It was ignored by you and by Syria.
It was not ignored by us, number one.
What did you do about it?
But number two, again, recall how sure the international community in the West were sure about Mr. Hussein using chemical weapons and possessing
you always divert back to something else.
Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I?
Why should you?
Because you know, the United States of America, the United States of America has destroyed Iraq. The United States of America has destroyed Libya. Now they try to destroy Syria. But the consequences of their mistakes become more and more dangerous because this time the international terrorism becomes much stronger. In case of Iraq, the chaos afterwards was more or less inside of Iraq. In case of Libya, it stayed inside of Libya. Now, if Syria is defeated, the international terrorism will rule the whole world.
Is there no war crime that Syria could commit, which is too cruel, too extreme, for Russia to say openly, enough, this is enough, we have to cut Mr. Assad loose? The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, told the Associated Press the other day that support for Assad was not unconditional. What are the conditions, then, under which you would withdraw your support?
Conditions are quite clear.
What?
If Mr. Assad and his government breaks the rules and violates the international law, humanitarian law.
They have, many times, according to the UN, many times.
If it is proved, if it is certified, of course, the attitude of Russia will definitely change. But as for now, it is not proved. We have so many different reports. You know how the Idlib tragedy started. One was a report from a human rights organization based in London and operated by a private person. Secondly, there was a piece of information by Reuters, the information agency. And thirdly, everybody else who wanted to believe in that started to say, look, it's a proof. It's a proof. We have no hesitations.
I asked you under what conditions Moscow would withdraw support from Syria.
You know,
and the gravest human rights violations on record are apparently not sufficient for you to withdraw your support.
Number one, there is no support to the authorities of Syria. You may repeat it so many times, but we are in Syria on a different purpose. No doubt about that. And
when you say that, people are going to think you're on a different planet, not just a different purpose.
Believe me, people do not live just in Germany and the United States of America. I have so many discussions. I get so many positive responses on the Russian policy in Syria from so many countries in the world. So if you believe that people who live in the world are people who watch your TV program, you are completely wrong. There are much more many.
Konstantin Kosachev, it's been good to have you on Conflict Zone.
Likewise.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.